Peter Fitch, Principal Keeper, St Anne's Lighthouse, 1990 to 1996. How would you describe St Anne's? Well, St Anne's is an unremarkable light, only 42 foot high, situated at the entrance to a very busy stretch of water. Its main lens, a first order catadioptric, one white flash every 5 seconds, the reinforced sector flashing red back up the Avon. The rear light was discontinued around about 1910. The front light becoming the main navigation aid that we know today, with the Matthews burner being the source of illumination. And perhaps during the 1920s, the Hood Vapour burner would have replaced the Matthews. When the station was electrified in 1958, the Hood would have eventually been replaced with a 3 kilowatt lamp, and then later by a 1 kilowatt MBI. Who could have envisaged St Anne's of the late 1980s? Its watchroom littered with computers for monitoring. But we also had a parquet and a sailor transceiver for communications. We have a short tower, lantern on top with the main light, watchroom attached along with a battery room. Running back east, the keepers' dwellings, 4 in number, PK's dwelling, AK's 1 and 2 and the SAK quarters. There was a 5th dwelling added once the station needed 5 keepers. To the west, we have the fog signal, a bank of 72 tonneau emitters. In front of the fog signal, on the edge of the helicopter pad, the 2 large Jet A1 fuel tanks. And beyond that, the old fog signal house, given the grand title of Transit Lounge, once the helihops were carried out on a regular basis. My first stint at St Anne's would have been about 1984 as an AK. Around about October of that year, I moved from Portland. Eddie Matthews was the principal keeper. I'd been with Eddie at Dungeness back in the 1970s. It was during Eddie's time at St Anne's that some serious thought has been given to the station becoming a multi-role. Monitoring the automatic lights, Small, South Bishop, Strumble and Skolcombe, and with helicopter operations taking place. Smalls was the only one still to be automated by the time I arrived in 1984. The intense work involved during the Smalls automation gave us a good insight into what we would be taking on at St Anne's. Once the offshore stations were automated, we started doing the attendant work at these stations. Each AK was assigned a light. Malcolm had Skolcombe, Dave, he had the Smalls, I had South Bishop, and Strumble was looked after by Rowley, who was a local AK working from home. He lived in Goodwick, just down the road from Strumble. Little did we realise that St Anne's would become the busiest station in the service. We had some good times though, some laughs. Eddie got reprimanded for wearing non-issue socks on an elder brethren's inspection. He also got telling off for carrying his cap as he walked down to the engine room with the elder brethren. Eddie created a golf course on the large grassy area towards the helipad. We also had some serious incidents though. Eddie had departed to the Lizard. We had a new PK. A serious incident on the Smalls caused a lot of friction on the station, and I asked for a transfer and was moved to Trevose in 1988. Malcolm stuck it out and he stayed on. How did I finish back up at St Anne's? Well, in 1989, Trinity House decided that because of the direction the service was going in, as we moved towards automation and technical changes taking place, it was no longer able to appoint PKs on seniority alone. You had now to go in front of a promotion board and be appointed on merit. I was actually promoted Principal Keeper to the Lizard in 1989. Eddie, who was senior to me and wanted to stay at the Lizard, not go to Start Point, his next station, he petitioned the elder brethren and I finished up at Start Point. On the grapevine we were hearing of lots of troubles at St Anne's, and I understand that serious thought had been given to handing the light over to Milford Haven Port Authority, and the monitoring would have been done along with the attendance work from Trinity House Depot at Swansea. It would have been about around 6 months after arriving at Start Point. I was told by the depot manager at Harwich I was being transferred to St Anne's as PK. Captain Barnes, the chief superintendent, made it clear that 6 months was about the time scale he was looking at to turn things round. I don't think we knew really how much trouble there'd been at St Anne's. To give me half a chance to get things running smoothly, where possible, I was able to pick my own AKs. I arrived at St Anne's for July of 1990. Malcolm was still the senior AK. I think Malcolm had been at St Anne's best part of 20 years. Captain Barnes was true to his word, and St Anne's had the best assistant keepers in the service. Senior keeper was Malcolm Smith-Goslin, AKs Peter Bolton, Jack Daniels, Barry Hawkins and Rowley Parsley. They were what you call the permanent staff. One problem I found when I arrived at St Anne's was the influence that Swansea Depot had taken on. Harwich was the operation centre, but Swansea was the maintenance depot. Malfunctions were being reported to Swansea rather than OCC. They tried to dictate how things were run. All lights and keepers come under operations. Maintenance had no say in the operation and running of these lights. Once that was sorted out, we went from strength to strength. Although this video is about St Anne's Lighthouse, I like to see it as the St Anne's group. You can't ignore the automatic stations that came under St Anne's. So what was the role of St Anne's? What is a multi-role station? We still had the lens to clean at the station, we still had the brass to polish, the engines to look after, standby generator, the fog signal triple frequency generators to maintain, along with the station batteries. I suppose most keepers in the service would be quite happy to work a light like this, but the additional duties made St Anne's an unpopular station. We had all the new computer monitoring equipment that enabled us to test run all the standby systems on the offshore lights. But still at St Anne's, you'd have to walk down to the engine room to attend to the standby generator and fog engines, and occasionally give a control cabinet a good kick. We used to get a lot of sticking relays. So in addition to St Anne's, we had the offshore stations to maintain. In its infancy, attendant duties at these offshore stations would be a quick trip out for 2 keepers. You'd check the batteries, give the engine room a good going over, check the oil levels, etc. Very little time to do serious work. We had a checklist supplied that had to be filled out, returned to the depot after each visit, but this was only a couple of sides of A4, not an accurate record of the station status. We devised new checklists that covered everything on station. Peter Bolton, assistant keeper, he was a bit of a computer geek. He built a computer and put all the offshore station details on it. Great help. Because of the short time that had been allowed on station, if you had a big lens like the Smalls, you had very little time to give it a good clean. So we did try and get our length of stay extended, and we were successful in that. Perhaps we'll go offshore by midday Friday and return Monday, weather permitting. I recall one visit to the Smalls made by Malcolm and Peter Bolton. Because of deteriorating weather, our helicopter could not get them off. It was stuck in Swansea. Malcolm and Peter were down to emergency rations, so I had to call in Sea King from Brawdy to get them off. Being responsible for all the helicopter operations that were run from St Anne's, new skills had to be learned. So Trinity House sent us on various courses. We did an helicopter firefighting course at HMS Osprey in Portland. We learnt to rescue 2 empty oil drums from a Sea King. Underslinging courses, again, we did at HMS Osprey, Portland Harbour. Management of Jet A1 helicopter fuel. I had to go all the way up to Dice Airport in Aberdeen for a day to learn that. Dangerous goods by air, again, we had to go up to Dice. Helicopter operations were a big part of our duties at the station and offshore. St Anne's was the busiest station in the service, being the only lighthouse that operated helicopters from their own pad, so keepers had to be available at all times. You could finish the middle watch midnight to 4 and then be expected to be back on the pad by 8 o'clock. That had happened on numerous occasions. The minimum for operations, 3 keepers at base. You had to have 1 on communications, that radio and telephone. firefighter fully kitted out in full firefighting gear, and a flight pad officer. That would take care of perhaps single personnel flights, but it was under slinging or having a day of multiple cargo flights, then a full crew was needed. Most refuelling was rotor run refuels. When we was working helicopters, operations would start long before the first scheduled arrival. Morning watch would do the Jet A1 fuel checks, and no flying would take place until we were sure that there was no water present in the fuel. The helicopter would not leave its overnight stop until it was clear. All fire extinguishers had to be checked and positioned. Full foreign object on the deck check of the pad. That was repeated throughout the day. If we were underslinging, all the weights had to be checked, the nets made up. You may be serving more than one station, so it was important to group the nets accordingly. Internal loads all had to be weighed. If we were flying any dangerous goods, all the paperwork had to be made out. Perhaps one of the most demanding jobs would be refuelling offshore. Not too bad if you was doing it from one of the tenders, but if you was doing it from St Anne's directly, you needed 2 keepers offshore with the remaining conducting ops at base. Strumblehead was another station under our control, mainly looked after by Rowley, who lived just down the road from Strumble at Goodick. St Anne's had to have a keeper available for any unforeseen occurrence, any emergencies. Failures that could not be resolved from the base via the computer would, in the case of Strumble, we'll say, result in a turnout for Rowley, whatever time of day or night. If he had an offshore emergency, as soon as the helicopter could be got to St Anne's, 2 keepers would attend, remembering to take provisions and water if a stay was necessary. Along with the lighthouse, we also monitored the St Gowan light vessel. We did have a bit of a scare with the St Gowan on one occasion. The computer monitoring its position threw up an alarm. She was drifting quite rapidly out of position. We reported this to operations at Harwich, only to be told that she was under tow by Trinity House vessel Mermaid. There were some red faces at Harwich and Swan, they'd forgot to inform us.
Get your suit on. The little after detention change. It's okay.
You usually about 4.5 volts, something like that.
And you've got to check up and make sure, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm setting the news on anything you say. There's another shopping feature for the next time.
I'll finish with perhaps the most monumental event that took place during my time at St Anne's, the stranding of the crude oil tanker Sea Empress at the entrance to Milford Haven. That took place just after 8 p.m. on the 15th of February 1996, spilling thousands of tons of crude oil. Before I get to that incident, it's worth mentioning two other oil-related incidents involving the St Anne's group. During a really bad storm in summer of '94, I was on the middle watch. I took a look at the Smalls anemometer on the computer. It was really blowing, perhaps a 9, approaching storm 10. We had big seas and swell at St Anne's. You can only imagine what the seas were like at the Smalls. What interested me more was the fuel readings on the same page. I was checking the wind about every half hour or so, but I noticed that the fuel figures were dropping quite rapidly. Malcolm took over at 0400 and was going to keep monitoring it. The situation was not changing, so I informed OCC at Harwich. A flight was arranged for the trip out to investigate. And if I remember rightly, it was a bright sunny day. And as we approached the Smalls, all you could see was a vast expanse of shimmering purple. The diesel tanks on the landing had been breached. The big sea had removed a large concrete cap covering the tanks on the landing, and it split the fiberglass tank inside. By August '94, Swansea had set up some emergency fuel tanks using 100-gallon pillar tanks arranged around the gallery and on the helipad. A pumping arrangement was set up to feed the engine room. Because of a malfunction, backfeeding some of the pillar tanks resulted in a large number overfilling and bursting, with gallons of fuel spilling down the outside of the tower. Sea Empress. Well, just before 8 p.m. on the 15th of February 1996, I'd just taken over the watch. The phone had just rung as I came into the watch room. It was Mark, the temporary PK, who was due to arrive next day for duty. Sat at the desk talking to Mike, I could see for miles, really clear night, nothing unusual in seeing a tanker approaching. At the far side of the helipad, the transit lounge, with windows along the side facing the watchroom at a slight angle. By now the tanker was positioning for its entrance to the channel to pass the mid-channel light. All the companionway lights were on and reflected in the transit lounge windows, showing forward movement, and then with no warning they appeared to move in reverse. The Sea Empress had struck the mid-channel rock and the stern was swinging back. Momentum then carried it forward and it finally came to rest opposite my kitchen window. Chaos had descended at St Anne's again. OCC at Harwich were informed and their response was quite simple. Was all our NAVRs working correctly? Yes. Little did we realise the impact that this event would have. It's well documented the disaster this caused to the wildlife and the coastal areas of Pembrokeshire. By the following day, half the world's media, or so it appeared, descended on St Anne's. We were already involved with the police and other emergency services by that time. Police set up a temporary office in the watchroom. Along with Trinity House, they wanted to keep the public away. The best place to observe all the action was on our land. As things developed that following day, it was decided that our helipad was going to be an asset. So that became a priority regarding keeping the public at bay. The decision was made by Trinity House to evacuate the Lighthouse families. Gas or explosion was a possibility. No one complained though. It was decided that the Griffin Inn down in Ayr was the best option for the evacuated. Mark had now arrived on station. It was obvious because of the number of people arriving at St Anne's Head, it would not be able to leave the station unattended. We assured the powers that be at Harwich that we would find a nice safe place to carry out our duties. Remember, you volunteered was the response from OCC. We had a constant battle with the hordes, general public and the media. We lost count of the times that we had to clear the helipad. This is an entry from the St Anne's order book of the 21st of February 1996. Station visited by Captain P. H. King, accompanied by Mr. P. R. Snadden, District Maintenance Manager, to express the Board's appreciation to Mr. P. Fitch, PK, and his colleagues for their excellent service on the extraordinary circumstances of the stranding of the COT Sea Empress off the station. On this occasion, the station had to be evacuated because of gas. The Keeper staff rendered significant service while maintaining the aids to navigation in the best tradition of the service. Peter King, Director of Operations. And this is my opportunity to thank all the permanent AKs and the pool keepers that made St. Anne's. A good PK needs good AKs. You're nothing without them. This was my final month as PK at St. Anne's, having taken redundancy and been given the role of attendant at Paul and Bill Lighthouse.